I've been sick for years about the fact that we've totally lost that laboratory. But when I went to university in 1950, I was amazed to find out that the University of Alabama did not have as good a chemistry laboratory and physics laboratory as the organic school had when I went to school here. And I learned much more about chemistry and physics right over there than I did at the university. But the one thing, the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome, I was delighted to be at the school. I was quite happy in this school. And, I even hated to get through. But the biggest hurdle I had to overcome was folk dancing. I didn't want to folk dance. And that was one of the things that Mrs. Johnson had to help me with. And I believe that all she said was, "Now, young man, part of our curriculum here is folk dancing, and you have to do it. And it's not going to hurt you. And after you've done it a little while, you find out that you enjoy it." And Paul Frederick was the folk dance teacher. And he was a sight. And he would sometimes, if we weren't paying sufficient attention, he'd have us do Blue-Eyed Stranger 3 or 4 or 5 times, one right after the other. It also was a matter of helping us develop the Morris step and learning to do the Morris dances. Once Mrs. Johnson caught me in the pool room, which was just next block up the street. And I had no idea what I was doing there. But she caught me by the shoulder and turned me around and says, "Young man, I want to see you in my office as quick as I get there." And walked out. I felt sure I had it. I was going to be expelled, and this was going to upset my family a great deal. But I went to her office, and she said, "I'm not going to ask what you were doing up there, but I want to tell you that you were off campus when you were supposed to be on campus. And you were in a place that you're not supposed to go. And I trust that you will never make that mistake again. Now, do you think you can remember that and avoid that?" "Yes, ma'am." Sure, And that's the only time that I ever suffered any reprimand from Mrs. Johnson. But when she was here, she was quite busy about the campus. She would go from class to class, and I don't just come in and stay a few minutes, but the most, remarkable thing to me was the assemblies. And I don't remember if we had a daily assembly, but I know that at least twice a week in the assemblies we sang. And Mrs. Johnson led the assemblies. And we would talk about such things as when spring vacation was going to be and how long it was going to be this year. And there were lots of holidays that the organic school did not observe. We didn't have, my recollection is, we didn't have 2 weeks off for Christmas, for instance. We'd have Christmas a day or 2 days before and a day or 2 days after, depending upon the arrangement. But shortly after Christmas, we were back in school. And we have sometimes as much as a 3-week spring vacation. Spring vacation was timed to coincide with either planting time or potato harvest time. And lots of the kids would go out and work in the potato fields during potato harvest time. And a good many of us lived on farms. Those of us who lived here didn't paid a nominal tuition, like $6 a month. And the school had wood stoves. I managed to acquire an old vehicle of some sort, and I paid much of our tuition by cutting wood and hauling it to school. And I would come early in the morning and bring a load of wood every day and put it where it looked like it was most needed. And I never did get to the point where I was caught up. I mean, they still had to get wood, fuel elsewhere part of the time, but I did manage to furnish a great deal of it during the years I was here. And once, I think it was Halloween, one Halloween, I think maybe 1935, when Ted Dyer and Franklin Beatty were seniors, somebody took a one-horse wagon.
You better repeat that.
Somebody took a one-horse wagon, took the wheels off, and hauled it up on top of Cummings Hall and put the wheels back on. I left it sitting up there with the wheels on and put a mule in the hall. And the next morning, soon after school convened, the bell rang for assembly. And Mrs. Johnson said, "I don't know who did it, but I want the high school boys to go get that wagon down and clean that hall up." Assembly dismissed. And I don't know whether that was appropriate discipline or not, but it was effective. Everybody that had had anything to do with it was quite ashamed of themselves, and it took a long time to reach a point where we could talk about it and laugh about it and be happy. But nowadays we look back at that incident as one of the things that happened that Mrs. Johnson could have just raised all manner of Cain about, but didn't. Part of our wood cutting operation, Mr. Frederick's owned property up north of Fairhope. Of course, it's not north of Fairhope now, but it was north of Fairhope then, on the other, north of Bayou Charbon, lots of pine trees in a subdivision. He was trying to clear his subdivision. And we would go, we made a saw over in the shop, got a great big saw blade, I think it was 30 inches in diameter, and fixed it on a swinging carriage and arranged to drive it with a Model T Ford engine. We never did get that engine to run coolly enough, and we had to have about 3 boys busy running from the faucet, wherever the water supply was, to the saw site, wherever we had the saw set up, which was often right over just southwest of this building. We had a jumping pit out there filled with sawdust. Much of the sawdust came from that wood cutting operation. And it took just about it took about half of the high school to run that saw. I mean, somebody had to operate the throttle, and because we didn't have a governor and didn't have a way to acquire something to make a governor out of. So every time that we got ready to cut a log, somebody had to speed the engine up, but then they had to be slowed down as soon as that cut was made while we moved the log and got ready to make the next cut. But we would cut some tremendous piles of wood sometime in the fall, spend 2 or 3 days at it. Another thing particularly I remember enjoying was the woodworking shop in the old kindergarten building. Kindergarten and First Life were in a nice, airy building with high ceilings and lots of windows, just off in the southern part of the campus. And there we had a jigsaw that you pedaled. and a little lathe that was pedal driven. And it, for some reason, those machines intrigued me much more than the electrical driven mechanical devices in the shop. I like to work with my hands, I guess, because I particularly liked to do things with planes and make things like cedar boxes. And of course I regret having lost the shop, and I don't know, haven't kept up with what the school's doing now about the shop. I don't know whether they have a shop or not. I hope they do. But woodworking, handcrafting, silverwork, clay, pottery work, I often wonder if I might have kicked that wheel sometime, you know.
That is part of the original, one of the original
I'm sure.
wheels from the old craft shop.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. I never did succeed in doing much with clay. I didn't have a touch for it, but I'd rather be in the woodworking shop, building some sort of contraption, whether it was benches or tables. We made benches and chairs and tables for all the furniture was made in our shop, and I think that it perhaps helped keeping down breakage, because if anyone were to break a bench, he would be breaking something that somebody nearby had made, or somebody earlier had made, but it was